Good evening. Tonight here at the farm, we're going to work on this Nikki carburetor off of my Briggs and Stratton engine that goes on the Cub Cadet riding lawnmower. So over here, there's a few numbers and there's a model in there and serial number. And I don't remember offhand how it is that you decode those. However, for our purposes this evening, I just used the Briggs and Stratton website, got a parts manual off of there, and from that is what I determined, basically get all the rubber pieces for my purpose. That's what I determined I needed. So initially, I wanted this video to kind of be a how-to, if you will, but I think what I'm going to do is we're going to call this a how I did. I don't know that my methods are 100% by the book of how that they intend on you work on these, but I'm going to take you along for what I do and have had success with in the past, and we'll see what this carburetor has to say inside. So the first thing you're going to want to do is hose off the outside of your carburetor. I've already done that to this one. I didn't really worry about up here because I'm not going to get that inside of the bowl, but the bowl looked similar to the intake part there. So I just rinsed that off, threw it in the parts washer, brushed it down, blew it off, got the junk off of it. What you want to do is make sure that none of that ends up inside of the carburetor. Then break these two screws loose, and I'll have this all laid out here in the next shot of what's on the inside. Okay, so we got this all taken apart here, and I guess we'll start at the bottom. This in here, this is your fuel shut-off solenoid. You'll hear that click on and off, usually with the ignition switch or, some other portion of your start cycle. On this mower, it happens to be the ignition switch. You also notice that there's some debris down in the bottom of that. I can't say that I am surprised. This mower was left sit outside for quite a while before I got it. And I know the fuel tank had some water in it, so I would assume that the carburetor also had some water in it. There also appears to be some scratches up in the top part of this bowl. Looks like maybe somebody had sanded on it at some point. And I have the feeling that I am not the first one to be in here. Up next, there's this little plastic adapter that is an O-ring around it. My O-ring is actually, fairly smushed looking. It looks okay from this view, but if you look at it from the side, it's definitely an oval. Needle and the pivot for the float. The needle, yes, it does have a chunk taken out of the end of it, which is definitely going to be part of our issue. And these are your jets, I guess you'd call them, or orifices. They go over top of these tubes here that have this series of cross-drilled holes, and there is another rubber gasket underneath that. I have, obviously, all the rubber pieces, the bowl gasket, that one, the O-ring, and the needle. That's what I'm planning on putting back in. I'm going to put run some fluid through all these ports, maybe even a wire. I do have a carburetor tool, port tool. Looks a lot like a torch tip cleaner, and as a matter of fact, I have used my torch tip cleaner to clean carburetors, and I've used my carburetor tool to clean torch tips. I really don't think that there's anything different between the two. I've got everything cleaned up, or at least cleaned up as well as what I think it needs to be. I think I did a pretty good job. So the rubber piece that's in there, Briggs calls that a seal O-ring. Sure. 690988. That's this little piece here. Then the jet orifice cover, I'm not sure what they call this piece. That goes on top just with two screws. Then obviously the float and the needle go in, and then there's the piece that goes down inside of the bowl. So we'll get some of this buttoned up here, and I'll bring you back. And just like that, we're ready to put the bowl back on it. Got all the new pieces lined up here, new needle, new rubber. And here are the part numbers for anyone that is curious to that. I got one more thing to do on the other side of this once I button this up. There's a flat gasket on the top side that there's a plate over that I ended up taking off to flush these jets out. And I believe that this thing has been apart before because that gasket is torn, and I don't believe that it tore whenever I took it apart. It pretty well fell apart whenever I took the screws out of it, and there's a flap basically torn into the other gasket. On the top side of this carburetor, there's a plate that would bolt over top of this, and these are just cross-drilled passages. A couple of them do look cast in. These, they control your idle, they control your mixing, and, there's just, like I said, there's a flat plate, which is right here, and just a gasket underneath it. The paper was torn on the other one, so I had to run up to the house real quick and punch these holes. My gasket punches are up there, not in the garage here. The punches that I use are actually for leather, and I think they intend on that you would actually drive on them, hit it with a hammer. And I don't do that. I've actually sharpened mine, just with a piece of fine grit sandpaper, and got it so I can just push on them, and it takes some effort, push, twist, but it makes a really nice clean hole in the gasket, as you can see, and they do work very well. Got that plate put back on. Gasket actually is a little on the big side. You can still see my pen line there, but it's not sticking out any place that's going to matter or affect the operation. So we're going to leave it like it is, and we're going to call this carburetor, I'll call it repaired more so than rebuilt. I'm sure somebody out there would call it rebuilt, and I guess in the right sense it is. It's got new parts in it, and it should function again. However, I'm going to call it repaired, and we're going to call this a wrap for the evening. And at some point here, we'll get this put back on the motor. Again, if you haven't checked out that video, go ahead and do so. This is sort of a sidebar of that, and hope you enjoyed, and thanks for watching.